Hi, it's Wyndham. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you have had a joyful and peaceful few days. Today, I want to talk to you about blueprints. I've named this the Blueprint Coach channel, and that is because my mission in life is to help people live the life they really want to live. And the only way we do that is by writing our own blueprints. But in order to understand our blueprints, we have to understand a little bit about us, physiologically, mentally, how we've evolved, which has predisposed us to this idea of blueprints. So if you go back hundreds of thousands of years in our evolutionary journey, we are still carrying the hard wiring of that period of man's evolution. And that hard wiring is solely focused on survival. Right? At that time, take yourself back. It's a very dangerous world. There are lots of things out there trying to kill us. We essentially are small. We're slow. We're not very strong. We're soft. We're probably incredibly tasty. And lots of stuff wanted to eat us. So we had to develop ways to survive. And that is our old hardwired thinking. So essentially we are cognitive and energetic misers. We do as little as we can to survive. And that is hardwired. So although we all know people who would choose to go out and run marathons, high energy requirement, like innate in us is preserve our energy. Preserve our demand on finding more food because it was hard to find. The really interesting thing from our blueprint perspective is our cognitive miserly nature, which means we don't want to have to think all of the time. Right? Let's take ourselves back to the savannah. If we hear a rustle in the grass, we have two choices. We either sit there and go, I wonder what that is. That could be something trying to eat me, but it might not be. I'm going to go and have a quick look. We have a look in the grass, and lo and behold, there's a leopard there, and it eats us. So we don't go through that process. We learn the process once, right? We say, something in the grass, this could end my life. My reaction to that is, I'm going to run away. So survival requires us to have a stimulus and an almost instantaneous reaction that keeps us safe, that helps us survive. So in that instance, the thinking is rustle in the grass. My experience, I've been through the thinking pattern, my experience tells me that could be something very dangerous. I don't want to have to do this thinking again. Automate a response, run away. And so what happens when we hear a rustle in the grass and it isn't a leopard? Well, we don't hang around to find out. We just run away and we survive. So our brain goes, good automatic reaction, well done. We've survived. Let's keep that. Next time we hear the stimulus of a rustle in the grass, instantly our brain goes, run away, we survive. We reinforce that automatic thought. Which is great when we are genuinely looking at life-threatening situations. Having those automatic reactions is perfect if we are genuinely under threat. So we live in a modern world where our brains are still predetermined and pre-constructed to run blueprints that are automatic reactions to stimulus designed to keep us safe, designed to help us survive. So that's fundamentally what we're talking about when we talk about blueprints. Our blueprints are our automatic reactions to stimulus, primarily in order to help us survive. Okay. That's all great. Another thing we need to be aware of as human beings is that we are tribal. You know, we are, like I said, small, we're weak, we're soft, we're not very fast. So our survival was predicated on us being parts of a group. And this is where our blueprints can become a bit tricky. Because in being part of a group, there is a collective understanding about what is required of each member in order to remain part of the group. Really important, this. Whenever we are in a group, there are inclusion criteria, right? These are the often tacit, unspoken behaviours and expectations of us that mean we receive the protection of the group. We are included, but in order to be included, we have to behave in a certain way. So these inclusion criteria can include, expectations on us. It can state our definitions of success and failure. We as a group demand this is success and this equals failure. It can set the parameters and the limits of our own abilities. We are a group that can only go this far. Therefore, anyone who goes further is not part of the group. So once we get our head around the fact that our blueprints are automatic reactions to keep us safe, to keep us a member of a group, and that every group we are a part of has inclusion criteria. And these will be success and failure, they will be expectations on us and of us, they will be parameters around setting the limits of what we can and can't do, can and can't achieve. Once we've got those two concepts, we can then move on to this idea, well, when are they set? Because everything in our life is, to some degree, as a result of the blueprints that we are running. So let's look. I personally think there are 3 phases in our life around when our blueprints are set. The first, and fundamentally the most important, is set between our birth and the day we step out into the world as autonomous individuals. So the day we leave home. So from our birth to the day we leave home, that is phase 1. And there are 3 key areas within our lives where blueprints are set and inclusion criteria are imposed upon us. Family environment. Okay? However big or small your family is, we are given inclusion criteria to remain part of that family. Our parents will stipulate that we're, let's go back a few generations, seen and not heard. Whatever behaviour we exhibit is either tolerated or not. And if it's not tolerated, then our inclusion in that tribe, even though it's our family, is under threat. So we as human beings develop coping mechanisms and safety mechanisms that maybe adjust our behaviour to ensure we remain included. Family is a huge one, obviously. Second one is education. Whenever we go into school, from our earliest age, there are inclusion criteria for the school in general. There will be inclusion criteria for the class set by our teacher, the things they will put up with and they won't put up with. We all remember teachers who seem to pick on certain kids. That child is having to figure out coping mechanisms and safety mechanisms that protect themselves, that keep them in a group, even though being part of that group is quite painful. And the third area is our social lives as children. The little groups we get put into, the different kids we meet. And all of those kids will have different inclusion criteria from their family. If they go to a different school, they'll have different inclusion criteria there. There's also potentially our If our parents are religious, then there are more parameters being imposed on us from that particular spectrum of life or area of life. Now, these are all piling in on us. And the big challenge we have at this point is we have no choice. We don't get to exercise whether we think it's fair. We might have a sense of this isn't fair, but we can't do anything about it because we're too young. We cannot survive outside of these groups. We have not yet reached an age where we can be autonomous. So we don't have a choice, and we have zero awareness that this is what is happening. Now, the really important thing to remember is this stuff is incredibly powerful. So the behaviors we end up exhibiting, the coping mechanisms we end up developing, will run in to phase 2. Now, phase 2 kicks in from the point we take on our autonomous selves. So phase 1 is from birth until our autonomy, until we leave home. Phase 2 kicks in at our autonomous point in our life. And that point is either higher education. So if you go away to university, you are stepping into this world of autonomy, although you hopefully go back at holidays and things like that. Or it's when we step into the world of work. And what happens at this point is the inclusion criteria and the environments in which we are in change. So we still have our family, but we are spending less time with them. But let's remember that blueprint, the behaviours we and the coping mechanisms we have come up with are deeply ingrained by this point and are incredibly difficult to shift. We're taking those with us. But now, instead of education, unless it's higher education, but let's talk about work, you step into the world of work and suddenly the inclusion criteria for work change. And we, as animals within, as human beings within this environment, are still looking for inclusion. Our primary deep hardwiring is to find our tribe, to remain included, to remain safe. So at work, we are told, well, you have to work hard, you have to be productive, you have to be efficient. The ladder, corporate ladder or the career ladder, these are the rungs to it. This is what you should be chasing. This is what you need to do. These can be your expectations on remuneration. These are your expectations on praise. All those things are given to us by our work, our workplace. So when we change workplaces, some of these criteria change. But overall, society has a very clear view of what work should be. So that is setting our work inclusion criteria, it is setting our expectations, it is setting definitions of success and failure, it is imposing limits on us to some degree, and it is setting the limits that we think are possible. Socially, these situations change again because we're now autonomous. We now have an income. We now have new friends. We live in different cities. We maybe have moved. All these things are coming and posing challenges to us to figure out, how do I remain included? How do I remain safe in the bunch? Now there's a change that happens here. In phase 1, we have no choice and we have no awareness. Phase 2, we do have a choice. You get to choose who you work for. You get to choose the groups you spend time in. But we maybe don't have awareness. We are not aware that this is what is happening. We have yet to have that moment where we go, wait a minute. The way I am acting, the way I am thinking is not serving me. 1, I wonder where that comes from. 2, I wonder, is there something I can do about it? So we're still under this imposed blueprint. So what are these blueprints doing? Well, like we said at the beginning, they are shaping our automatic reactions to stimulus. And the mechanisms we create during phase 1 and phase 2 are coping mechanisms. The decisions we make end up being the stories we tell ourselves. So if we go back to hundreds of thousands of years ago and we hear a rustle in the grass, the story we tell ourselves is, there's a leopard, run away. So we just run away. And we don't get eaten, and therefore we're proved correct. The decision is the right one. Now, there could be nothing in the grass. It could have been wind. Who knows? And actually, if we'd stayed, maybe we would have seen something new and had a breakthrough in learning, and who knows what would have happened. But it doesn't matter, because the deep hardwiring, the blueprint we are following, helped us survive. Come forward to now. Phase 1 and phase 2 is about developing our coping mechanisms to ensure we remain included in the group. And this comes down to the stories we tell ourselves. These are our core beliefs. Right? We talk about, as coaches, we talk about limiting beliefs all of the time. This is where they come from. These blueprints, these periods in our life where we had no choice and no awareness, or we had choice but no awareness, and we are putting ourselves in environments, or we have been placed in environments where inclusion is paramount. We create beliefs according to our acceptance and survival within those scenarios. So if we are told constantly when we're younger, well, you're never going to amount to very much, us being included and remaining safe within that environment, if we fight that, we get fought back. And our brain is bombarding us with fear of being excluded. And if we're excluded hundreds of thousands of years ago, we're dead. It literally is life and death. And that is the wiring we are dealing with. It also looks to limit our perception, which becomes our reality. So these limits we put on ourselves, if we hear them often enough and we are told them often enough and we ultimately start believing them, they become our truth. So when we look at the world, we don't see opportunity, we see limits. And when we see people who are taking those opportunities, well, we're othered from them. Our blueprints have distanced us from them. So, well, there's a reason. They're them, I'm me. This is my lot in life. This is my small box. Because if I'm small, I'm less likely to break one of the inclusion criteria for this group, and I remain safe. You know, we could end up prioritizing other people's opinions over our own for the same reason. It's, well, if I voice my opinion, I get shouted down. I'm at risk of expulsion from this group. My safety is at risk. So we get to phase 2 and, you know, let's look at who has been giving us these beliefs, who has been imposing the blueprint. If I go back to my parents, phase 1, how aware were they that this is what is going on? I'm going to say not very. Now, they were very clear on certain aspects of their own childhood they didn't want to repeat with us. And so we had a very different upbringing to them. And yet, there are still these limitations. There are still these limiting beliefs that my parents unknowingly layered onto me. And I carry those through phase 1 into phase 2. And then I'm in a situation where, well, who else is imposing these things on me? The way an organisation works is set by the people who run it. Well, who set their inclusion criteria? Who set their limiting beliefs? Because they're imposing those on me. So how do we change this? Phase 3. Phase 3 is where we both have a choice and we start having an awareness of what is happening. We start understanding the history of our thinking. We start understanding that our limiting beliefs are not born of evidence. They're imposed on us as inclusion criteria to a particular group. And they're imposed on us at a point we either have no choice or no awareness, or both. So when we get to a point in our life where we're sat there going, there has to be something more, I don't know how to do it, I'm scared, I'm small, I'm not willing to stand tall and brightly, that is not our fault. That is the result of the blueprints that we are running. And the big challenge, if we're running to somebody else's blueprint, guess what? It's never going to take us where we really want to go, because it doesn't have our specific best interests in mind. The vast majority of our blueprints are driven by fear. That's somebody else's fear, way back down the line, being imposed on us, that we have adopted and think it's ours. It isn't. We've made it our own through the imposition of somebody else's blueprint. So when we get to phase 3, this is where we get the opportunity to write our own blueprint. We have choice. We can choose to do things differently. Now that you've watched this, you have awareness. You know that this stuff isn't helpful, and actually it's not about you. This has been handed down, often generation to generation to generation, and it takes one person to draw the line and go, actually, you know what? I'm going to go in search of what I believe, not what somebody else believed unconsciously. I am consciously going to search and choose what works best for me. Now that's all well and good, choice and awareness. Without those two things, we have nothing. But with those two things, we also have nothing until we couple choice and awareness with intentional action. It's so important that we act in a new way. If we want something different, we have to embrace our responsibility to create it. Nobody is going to come and do this for us. And the vast majority of people are not aware that most of what they think, what they say, and how they behave has been given or imposed on them. What they think, say, and how they act are coping mechanisms to remain included in groups they're probably not even aware of. So the only person who can change your life, the only person who can write your blueprint in a way that takes you where you really want to go is you. So how do you start? Well, nothing changes until we take intentional action. But how do we know which actions we should take? Which are the thoughts we need to challenge? What are the behaviours we want to change? Until we become really aware of all of those things, it's very difficult to take action that moves us in the direction we want to move in. It's the difference between mechanism and meaning. So bringing your awareness to what is happening and just observing, recognizing when your thoughts are not taking you in the direction you want to go, or your thoughts are actively holding you back. Observe, be aware, take note. You don't have to do anything about them in the first instance. But bringing your awareness to the actions you take that aren't helping you. Observe, be aware, take note. And then over a period of a week or two, if you've taken notes of these actions, you can then reflect back on them and say, well, how many of these are helping me? How many of these are serving me really? And how many of them are hindering? And at that point, you get to bring your intentional action to creating change. And I promise you, you will be scared. You will be nervous. It will feel like a huge deal. Because writing your own blueprint is. And the benefit the other side of it. You deserve to live the life you really want to live. It is time to stop reacting automatically based on other people's fear. And it is time to forge your own path. Write your own blueprint. Live your own life. Create the life you really want to live. I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon.